Hello, world. This is the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host, K-Mo. Thank you for taking this journey with us with real men, real problems, real solutions. Let's go. All right. Welcome back to the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host, K-Mo. We have a special guest today. He's calling in. One of my good buddies. I've known him for almost 5 years, right?
Yeah, about 5 years, yeah.
About 5 years. And this is King. We're going to go by King today, King. And we really just wrestled this. I know we've known each other for quite some time. This guy has been married for several years. When I met him, you were married when I met you, right, King?
Yeah, I was married I was just going into my second year of marriage.
Okay, yeah.
When we met, yeah.
Very good brother. I guess I'll tell a little bit about yourself if you want to go into it, not too deep, but been married for at least 5 years now. Now he has a child, and he's an educator. He's a good brother. Does things in community. Very into giving back to young men of color. And I wanted to make sure that we linked up and had a conversation. I know we've been talking about it for quite some time now, but to have you on for our listeners is really, really important. So you want to tell a little about yourself, King, or is that good?
Well, you got the basics, man. Like you said, we're married, going on 8 years in October.
Congratulations. That's a beautiful thing, man.
It is, man. I call it a beautiful struggle, man, but I love it. I love it. Got a young son. He's 2. Same birthday as my wife.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, man. But things are going well. I'm actually in the process right now of actually starting a charter school. Okay. So that's been my most recent endeavor. But outside of that, man, just been enjoying this, enjoying the things that are coming. Looking forward to everything.
Well, thank you, King, for explaining to the listeners who you are and kind of what you do. But you know, King and I have had a lot of different conversations in the past, and we've had other men on. But I think you really be able to touch on this. So we really wanted to have a conversation around the hardships of being a husband at a young age, and so what that looks like. And so I have some questions that I want to ask you, and we'll start off with the first one. Is basically it was the perception of being married, before you thought about it. What was it in your head, and then actually the reality of being a husband. And then the last one is kind of like wrapping it up is, kind of like what made you get married from those two things. So in my mind, I'm not married yet, so I kind of go first. But we've had conversations about, especially these days, why I had another episode talked about, is marriage still an option? So please tune into that one. But for me, I definitely believe marriage is still an option. I think that if you want something bad enough, and I'm not talking about like, I'm not talking about being picky, but just having standards about yourself and what you want. I think that's the first thing. And so when somebody has standards, you definitely have to be patient. And I think that's the hardest part to getting to know somebody or trying to find the person that God has for you or that is for you. And that speaks upon being patient. So a lot of people rush into things, and they may not make it last, or they get married for different reasons, right? And you being married for 8 years, I thought you can kind of touch on it because what I hear is once you get over that 5th and 6th year hump, you've had some struggles, and you kind of not an expert, but you're leading in the right direction. So can you talk to our listeners a little bit about what was your perception about getting married?
So prior to getting married, my perception of it was I've always had a positive perception of marriage. My parents had a great relationship. I've seen great marriages within my extended family, but I just felt like to find the right person, marriage would work. And you may have ups and downs with marriage with work because you found the right person. I always felt like if you found the wrong person, it wouldn't work. But when you're in it, the one thing you realize is that it is work regardless. It's work regardless. The thing is, even if you're equally compatible, you have to work at it to make sure that it stays good. Like I'm in a great marriage, and I have a wonderful wife. I'm not just saying that, but it's like saying it. I feel like I'm in a blessed situation, but it's something that we both work at, and I feel like I think everybody works equally at it. But as a man, I know that I work at it, whether it's dealing with outside influences, outside temptations, or just my own ideals and different things like that. It's marriage is work, and I don't want to argue. I tell folks all the time. I tell my friends all the time when they getting into marriage. I said just know this side isn't easier. It's a lot more rewarding, but it's not easier. And I think that as a single man, we enjoy the conquest of. I hate to say the conquest of it, but we enjoy the conquest of multiple women sometimes and different things like that. And people come to enjoy that. But the thing is, you kind of think, for me, it's understanding, do I enjoy that, or those are things that I've been told that I should like? And you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah.
Because you got your friends, they're like, man, I got this girl, I got that, I got this girl. And you're like, all right, well, they got multiple, I'm going to get multiple. But that's not, for me, I did it, and it wasn't, for me, I've always been inclined to deal with one person at a time. I felt like I maneuvered better that way.
Right.
And I felt like I was better suited for marriage. But even being suited for it and wanting it, it's work. So I guess to answer the original question, the perception versus reality is that marriage takes a lot of work, regardless of how compatible guys are. And I guess if you're not compatible, you just have to work that much harder to make it work. But when you are compatible, you work at it, but it's you, and the results are great.
What are some of those things that you feel like were like, you mentioned outside temptations or whatnot, but what are some other things outside of that? And go into that a little bit deep about, what are some of the challenges beforehand that you may have heard from, you said you had a good people to look around to, or you had mentors or people that were married. Were those things that they talk to you about, or did you ask or inquire about those things before getting married?
I actually, as I got older, when you're a kid, you see, you notice how your parents act and behave. Like the children that are in marriages that have parents that have marriages where their parents are merely together for them, they grow up to see that was actually what they were doing, and then that kind of distorts their approach towards relationships. So all of our parents' relationships and dynamics guide how we move. And then with my parents and people in my family, my parents' relationships and all the people around me, their relationships weren't perfect, but they were happy, and I could see that they loved each other. And for me, as I got older, I just asked questions about the things I didn't see. Like I had real conversations with my dad leading up to me getting married. I had real conversations with cousins and older guys that I was around about being married, and I asked questions about what's the hardest thing, or what's something you struggle with. And two things that always came up is that you constantly have to communication has got to be good, and you have to create boundaries for yourself.
Can you talk a little bit about that, those boundaries and communication?
So for communication, it's more so what I've noticed is that for me and my wife, it's coming from a place of understanding that we're not against each other, and that it doesn't make sense to stay upset with somebody, because when it's all said and done, I'm gonna go to bed when we're still in the same bed together. We're in the same room together. So we need to resolve it. But you got to be humble. I think a lot of times in communicating, folks aren't humble and just want to be right. And for me, and that was and a lot of times early on, that was my struggle. And I had to understand I don't need to be right. We need to come to a resolution.
Right.
And and it's constantly evolving. I've got an uncle who's been married for over 50 years, and they say, he told me communication. Communication is key. So that's something that you're always going to work on, because neither one of you was the same person you were the first day you met.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me, we got married when I was 28 and she was 26. So we met when I was 24.
Mm.
So, and she was 22. So we were young. We were young adults, and getting married at 28, like you're changing. Like, for me as a man, I've always joked that men don't really figure it out until 25. And even at 25, we're still figuring it out. But yeah, but definitely communication, and then getting to the boundaries thing. Just understanding boundaries in several different ways. Boundaries as to whom and to where you're going for advice. Like, for me, I understood that, and sometimes I couldn't take advice from my single friends,
right?
And because in some cases, it's easy for them to say, in their relationships, like, man, whatever, don't even bother with it. It is what it is, don't even bother with it.
Right.
Because that's how you deal with people you don't really care about.
Right.
And that was my approach when I dealt with women I didn't really care about. I'm not arguing with you. But you can't take that approach when you're in your marriage. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be an argument, but you have to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
So being mindful of who I'm taking advice from, also setting boundaries with you have to boundaries with the opposite sex. You can't, if you are a new vegan, you don't go to a steakhouse. So if as a newly married man, as a married person, you have to set boundaries. And I think a lot of times people fall because they don't set those boundaries or aren't willing to set those boundaries. And you gotta safeguard yourself against things that can hurt your marriage. You gotta make sure that you're putting yourself in positions to be successful. Same way we do in any other thing we do in our lives.
Right. So when you're going into prior to being married, though, these boundaries were already set, or when you were talking in your relationship, if you could think back that far, those are the type of conversation you were having in, was definitely when you were talking to people who were married, were boundaries being set, communication, and then making sure that you were respectful. Because when I talk about outside temptation, that's just being respectful, right? And so I would also say this, and again, this is me dating, but I have experience. I have experience, and I think I always try to come out of anything and being positive, not being negative, and nothing was always completely their fault or my fault. Like you said, I think that's a huge thing that you mentioned, was the fact that it's not about it being right. Since I've gotten older, almost 40 years old, it's not about me being right. I always tell my friends or people I've dated, I'm not trying to be right. It's just like, we just have to understand, what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? You have to be heard, I have to be heard, and we can just move forward from there. You know what I'm saying? Right. And I think that's the mature thing to do. And I don't even know if that came from, maybe I did speak to other people about it, but at some point in time, I was like, I'm not against you. Like, we're on the same team here.
Correct.
Why, we're on the same team. At the end of the day, we're moving. I have no ill wills about you. I'm not trying to hurt you in any kind of way, but we're on the same team. So I think that's very important that you mentioned that earlier. So as we kind of, after that, I guess the middle piece of that is, so what made you get married? So you're 28 years old, right? You know your peers, right? I know my peers at 28, and a lot of times I would say a lot of guys do get married around that age. However, what made you stay married? Because, what made you get married, right, in that case, but what allowed you to stay married into that reality?
So
after you figured out those things, like, what made you say, this is it, and I'm going to get married to this woman?
So I like women do. Guys have the things that they're looking for in a woman. And even though we're young, we know the different things we want. We know the different things we don't want. But more so, I think for me, I knew how, without sounding like a Hallmark card, I knew how I felt when I was with her. I knew the kind of person that I was when while we were dating, and I felt like I had improved. I felt like I was a better person because I was with her. Because she taught me different. She taught me a lot of different things, and she checked all my little quote unquote boxes. And my boxes weren't the ones you got to be 5'5", you got to be this, you got to be that, you got to be this. It was I dated. I dated. I just moved to Atlanta. I did what most folks do when they just moved to Atlanta. I enjoyed the new city, and I met. But the thing is, for me, I'm a little bit different because a lot of that wasn't fulfilling. A lot of that wasn't fulfilling. There's a lot of empty relationships. There's a lot of different things that weren't, that didn't provide things that I wanted long term. And so, at the time, I told myself I wanted to find a church, get back in the church, get back doing the things that I knew I wanted to do, but I wasn't because I was living a different way. And meeting my wife, I met her through family. And to be honest, I had never met anybody like her. And I never met somebody who was attractive, whose personality matched her looks, who was driven, great family, but also had a heart had a huge heart and genuinely cared about me and what I was doing. She was for me. As I looked at all those things and I looked at things outside of that, I was like, I don't need to keep looking. I feel like I said, this is it. And it wasn't. It was kind of odd because I think I figured it out fairly quickly, but I knew. But in dating her, there was so many different things that as I said, she was different. She wasn't like anybody that I had met or dated before. And to this day, I still feel the same way. She's unlike anybody I've ever met, and my image of her has not changed. I still hold her in a high regard, even higher regard now. And for me, as a young man, I didn't see the point in prolonging things just for the sake of saying, "Oh, well, we're together, but we're not married." I figured this is the appropriate thing. This is the appropriate thing to do.
Right.
And I've seen people that have dated for 8, 9 years and not get married, and I wonder. And for me, looking from the outside, looking in, I'm wondering why is he not moving forward?
Right.
Or if it's or if he wants to move forward and she doesn't, why doesn't she want to move forward?
Right.
And I feel like in a relationship, you have to make a decision. You can't just be in limbo. And kind of like with anything else, I don't feel like people treat the relationships like they do other things in life. When you have if you got different job offers, you have to make a decision on the job you want. When you get the grocery store, you make definitive decisions about the things you want at the grocery store. But when we deal with human beings and people, a lot of times we don't want to be definitive about those things, and especially in relationships. And
why do you feel that way? I mean, I think I know what I feel for what I think it might be, but why do you feel that is?
Well, with which one?
With, you mentioned, I guess I can go into it. So you mentioned the fact that I believe that people don't make decisions about people is because of fear.
Correct. 100%. I would agree with that.
I think that they're fearful of rejection, the unknown, and a lot of people don't even know who they are. They say
that's exactly what I was going to touch on.
They say they know what they want. They say they know what they want. They say they know, they have these things like that list that you're talking about. But a lot of times those same people don't even fit that list. They're just talking about a previous situations or experiences where they know they want to go now. The problem with that is you actually have to check those boxes yourself to even show the person that you're even that person. Because if not, to me, it's called a fraud.
Yep. I think a lot of times we hold people to, like you said, we hold people to a standard that we don't hold ourselves. And something that I was going to touch on is I think a lot of times we don't know who we are, which doesn't allow us to know what we want in other people.
Right.
I feel like when I met my wife and when I decided I wanted to move forward with marriage, I had a firm idea on who I was, the things I believed, and what I wanted for myself. And I think a lot of times people don't stop to take stock in, all right, this is who I am. This is, if somebody asked me to sum myself up in 2 to 3 sentences, I could say this about myself, but I want this in a partner. And I think that in a partner, you shouldn't have, I never feel like you need to have somebody that's the same as you. I feel like every person should fill in different gaps for that individual. But I think having a firm idea on who you are helps to make sound decisions on in different aspects of life, but especially the people that you're around. And think, man, I know you can attest to this. Just as we get older, our circle gets smaller. Just
Absolutely,
with our friends,
man.
Our circle of friends gets smaller because people that we dealt with before were around. We were doing certain things, but if you're not doing those things anymore, you truly see what kind of friendship it is if they're still calling or if you're still calling.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that that's one of the hardest things for me at this point in my life is, we don't talk that much, but I feel like we always had a connection. It's almost immediately. Like, it's not like we even had to say a whole bunch. As soon as you start talking, we kind of knew that we were on the same page and the same type of men. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but that's how I felt. Like, is there certain people that that you've come across that you're like, yeah, that guy is the same. We had the same mindset and we're moving the same way. And though we may hang out and stuff like that, that's not who we are. Like, I always tell somebody I'm dating or getting to know, and even my friends, I have heard some men who get back out, may have had a divorce or whatever the case may be, and they get back out there. And I'm like, that's not you. You're a husband. You're a dad. And so for me, I feel like I'm a dad. I feel like I'm a husband. I know God has that for me, and I believe that.
There you are.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly believe in that. So I think like-minded men have to kind of stick together with that to continue that legacy, and also show other young men that you don't have to be out there. Because I think a lot of our friends, and there's some of our friends who are still maybe lost. They're lost because, and they might be married. Just because you're with somebody doesn't mean that you're fulfilled. You could still be alone in the marriage.
Correct.
So I just feel like that person, that partner, needs to be somebody that can not necessarily, I don't like to use the word complete, but also finishes that puzzle for you.
They need to compliment you, definitely.
Pretty much. So getting back into it, and we're going to take a quick second and come right back. All right. All right. So we're back at the Brother to Brother Show. I'm here with my boy King, and we're talking about the hardships of being married as a man of color. And so the last question I wanted to not go into, just to kind of recap, we talked about, what was the perception that you had of being married? And then we talked about what made you get married. And then the last question I want us to kind of wrap up with is, what was the reality of being married? So you've been married for 8 years, that fifth year, was there anything in between those years that you felt like it was harder than others? This year was harder than the others. You almost made it 10 years. So, I mean, that's a huge compliment, to you. So was there anything that, a bump in the road, or that's something that you didn't foresee, or what's the real reality of being married?
So I would say that the reality of marriage is that you have to adjust all the time. You have to adjust all the time, and different. And as I think I talked about this before, as people change, you have to. As each of you is going to change, and when each of you changes, you have to change how you go about doing certain things. I think that different milestones also impact the relationship. I know for us, I think one of our biggest things, and just be 100% transparent, is that both of us are deeply rooted in our faith. I think that when that is in place, when both of you are kind of equally yoked and are deeply rooted in your faith, or
talking about faith. That's fine. Yes, faith and what now? You said equally yoked in faith.
Yeah. So just being equally yoked, I think that's made things a lot easier for us, because when each of us transitions to a different milestone in our own personal lives, it hasn't been that difficult. But I think that for us, the reality is it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and I think that each of us has worked hard to be the person we need to be for the other person. Adding a child into the picture doesn't make things easy, and you have to be willing to work that much harder, and you have to be able to communicate that much better with the other person. So it's just like I said before, man. It's a lot of work, and I can't really, in regards to different bumps and bruises throughout the road, I can't say that I've had that within my marriage, and that might not be the sexy thing to say, but I really haven't had it within my marriage, because I felt like being with the right person makes that a lot easier.
Yeah.
I felt like because as I can look at different marriages around me, and I've got friends that were divorced within the first 2 to 4 years of their marriage, and they'll be the first one to tell you that I didn't marry the right person. And when you marry the wrong person, it makes it difficult. I think that when you marry the right person, and that both of you are 100% invested and bought into the partnership, things go smoothly. And you're gonna have different ups and downs. I think for me and my wife are very similar in the fact that we both are very strong-willed. And then when you get two cars coming together, sometimes it doesn't go well. But we both work to come to a resolution.
I guess that's what I'm asking, right? Because I had that problem myself, and I know other people. I've had other friends of mine who've had issues because of the strong will. Like, I hear things like, "But how do you resolve?" Like,
you have to humble yourself. I think for somebody, you have to humble yourself. And
can you give us an example of what you mean by that? Like, give me an example of something's happened, and is it you humbling yourself all the time? She's humbling herself all the time. Like, what does that look like?
You're trying to get me in trouble. So let me let me answer this properly and accurately.
Right.
So for me,
it could be a situation that's simple, but just
right. But I'll say for me, I have to humble myself in situations, because a lot of times I can turn into a debater, and debating and prolonging a matter, that's not being solution oriented. So, like, in humbling yourself, you got to be accountable. I think that the sooner and the quicker that you're accountable for your part in a situation,
yes,
the other party can meet you there. And one thing I think that's good about my wife is that even if it's not in the timeline that I may want, she always comes back and is accountable and apologizes for what she's done. And I think that if you have two people that can humble yourselves in those situations to be accountable, that goes a long way. Because if nobody's gonna be accountable, you can go in circles. Because that's been huge for us. Because I wasn't always accountable. I was used to talking circles around folks, and in different previous relationships, I was used to talking circles around them and being able to get away with what I wanted. That wasn't the case with my wife. She was like, "No, you said this, and you did this." You can't, when somebody gives you the roadmap of where you went wrong, you can't tell them they're wrong. You got to own it. And even if they're not giving you that, you got to humble yourself to start down the path of a solution. I think that you got to be solution oriented, because if you just want to be right, you're gonna, for lack of better terms, you're gonna take an L every time. And that's not gonna behoove anybody, because when you do that, you're gonna lose in other areas. So,
let me ask you a question. So with that said, right, that takes a big person, right? And I've heard from my friends, family, sometimes people I don't even know, like, how mature I've always been, right? But with what you're saying, it makes sense to me, King. But what is that, like, how did you get to that point to understand that? Because we live in a world now where people are selfish, right? People are selfish. Nobody wants to take accountable, be accountable stuff. Even when you're at work, right? Like, you have to own certain things about what you need to do. And I feel like I'm a man of, it's a man of being, especially for men, You have to have integrity. You have to be accountable for your actions, and life is about the choices that you make.
Correct.
So whatever choice that might be, it's a good choice, a bad choice. You have to be accountable for whatever that is, that solution may be. So what does that look like, and how do you think that you came to that point? You know, instead of making the decisions that your other friends like made. You know, like what made you different than the guy or couple that got divorced after 4 years?
I think for me, I'll go back to the beginning. In full transparency, I was able to truly have a relationship with my wife because I was willing to do something that a lot of people aren't. My wife had never been with anybody sexually throughout her whole life.
Right.
And that was a vow she made to God, and she told me up front, this is a vow I'm keeping until I get married. I was willing to go on that journey with her, and we maintained that throughout our relationship and throughout the courting, and even up till we got married. And doing that, I was able to have a stronger relationship. I was able to actually have a relationship and a friendship with her, and I wasn't blinded by anything physical that was going on. And now you're going to be tempted all the time. I'm not talking about outside temptation. You're going to be tempted by each other because you guys are obviously attracted to each other. But that allowed me to have a real relationship and actually spend time with getting to know her and figuring out I really like her and not the few minutes I spend with her when we're in the act. Like, I think a lot of times people get lost in the physical infatuation or the infatuation with somebody else more so than liking who that person is. Like, I think, and I know for me, I can speak for myself. I know in previous relationships, that was me. I was in relationships too long because I liked one aspect more than I liked the person.
Right.
And with her, we actually had a relationship, I married somebody who I knew I actually liked and grew to love. And then as you get into the marriage, this philosophy is simple, but it helps me when we get into conflict where I asked her to be here. She didn't ask to be here. I asked her to marry me. And that was something, I forgot who told me that, but that, as simple as the concept as it was, that was something that helped me to frame myself whenever I get in situations and want to go somewhere I should. I asked her to be here. So I in some situations, I may have to be the person to bring us back to where we need to be. And I'm not always that person. I have a temper. That's my Achilles heel. I go from 2 to 10, but I'm not. But I think in those situations where I know I'm wrong or we're both just going at it, I have to humble myself and understand. I asked her to be here, so we got to figure this out. Or neither one of us is going anywhere. So what sense does it make to just stay upset?
So with that temper that you have, right? So how does she cope or help you with the temper? Or is it something you just find that you just don't need to do?
It was twofold. One, it was something that I knew and know that it's not something that behooves the situation. I had to put strategies in place to remove myself from the situation before I even got to a point where I did or said something that I shouldn't say or do. And then for her, I watch how she moves too, because she's a very even. When she gets in a situation, she likes to make sure she's even killed. And I want to make sure that I'm not going above her, regardless of what she may say. That gets me to that point. But it's just that we both have to be under the mindset of. I know for us, we both under the mindset of let's figure this out. And then for me, I know her. If I'm accountable for my actions and I come at her properly, this conversation is short. My whole philosophy, I want short conversations. I don't want long conversations, long drawn out conversations. It doesn't. You need to resolve this quick so we can move on. And she can go watch Housewives. I can go watch my basketball game, and we can be all right, come back together at night and be fine. But it's it takes, as I said, in all that I've said, it takes work and it takes understanding. And for me, it took understanding who I am and what I need to do and why I'm here and what my role is within this relationship.
Right. Yeah, I definitely we're going to have a part 2 to this because, we're speaking a lot about integrity. We're speaking a lot about accountability. We're speaking a lot about how you even get to this point. And I think it's just noble of you as a man to even take on to that and then find somebody and be blessed with somebody who is exactly what you want her to be. And she's exactly what you want. She's exactly who you are to her. And so I think that's a wonderful thing just listening to you, man. I know our listeners are probably like, trying to figure out how you did it, myself included. But, I really do respect that, brother. I love you as a brother, and we definitely want to continue to have you on to speak knowledge to some young brothers, guys my age, and then older too, because we all need to continue this cycle. Because we all get discouraged, we all have hardships. It's not a lot of men of color talking and having positive conversations. And I know every time we had conversations, that's what we do. So this is the Brother to Brother Show. Thank you, King, for being on.
Glad to be on, brother. I appreciate you having me.
And let's continue to stay smart and do the right thing. Take care.
Yes.
Please know we love you, work with us, be with us, and know we're coming from the heart. This is the Brother to Brother Show.